I've done a lot of guides over the years on how to solo flawless, almost all of the dungeons in Destiny, but it's been a while since I've gone back to update any of those older guides. With the game ending, I wanted to do one final update on the solo dungeon experience and go over some of the builds that you can take into all of these dungeons to give yourself the most amount of success. This video is going to prioritize simplicity above all else. I know there are many things one could do to optimize every facet of every build for every fight. My goal is to get you there in as few builds as possible. What I'm not going to be doing here is specifically going over the strats for every single fight again, but rather just updating the builds. If you need a refresher on the encounters, or maybe you want more specific advice, just check out my older guides. I think they still kind of check out. The majority of the dungeons, though, are outdated when it comes to the combat portion of the encounters, so you should be able to just brute force a lot of things nowadays outside of mechanics. I'm also going to assume that you have a decent arsenal of weapons and armor available. This is not something I think you should be doing with an underwhelming set of weapons and armor, even though things have gotten easier. For starters, when it comes to what set bonus you should be running, there is one set in particular that is going to work for every class and every build, and that is the Exodus Down 4-piece bonus from Nessus. This is very easy to farm, and it has a set bonus that is globally useful. Of course, there are many other neutral set bonuses or build-specific set bonuses to work with, and if you want to work with those instead, I'm definitely not going to stop you. But Exodus Down works with every build. The stats you go for, on the other hand, are going to completely depend on your build. I'm going to mention some other set bonuses in some upcoming sections, but just know that Exodus Down is always included in my suggestions. Hey, it's food time. This video is brought to you by Cook Unity. Cook Unity is a chef-to-consumer platform where you can pick from over 300 meals made by real chefs and have them delivered straight to you. With a range of dietary options from paleo, keto, high protein, and several others, you will eat food and you will enjoy it. Or else they're gonna come for you. My wife and I actually forgot to set our meals recently, but since we've been using Cook Unity for so long, they completely locked in on all the stuff that we enjoy, so we didn't even need to worry about it. Cook Unity tracks your meal preferences based on what you've ordered in the past, so if you ever forget, they'll just hook up the right meals for you. She really loves the shrimp in creamy poblano sauce by Chef Santos Jimenez, while I've recently come to enjoy the bistro-style meatloaf by Chef Kevin Meehan. Although, Cook Unity must know that pulled pork is one of my favorite foods because they hooked it up here as well. Thanks, Chef Chase Evans, all right here in Seattle, Washington. You know me too well. So if you want to become best friends with Cook Unity, you can't. Because they're my best friend. But if you want to be good friends with Cook Unity, head on over to cookunity.com/Datto50 and use code Datto50 to get 50% off of your first order. Did you actually say it when I pointed the mic at you? That's cookunity.com/Datto50, code Datto50 to get 50% off of your first order. Thank you to Cook Unity for sponsoring this video. Next, when it comes to weaponry, while things like Truth and 1000 Voices are doing amazing damage, when it comes to trying to do solo or solo flawless content, it is very easy to explode yourself with these weapons. I do suggest using them, especially 1000 Voices, but just be aware of the risks in doing so. Sleeper Simulant and Dragon's Breath are on the list as well. It's a bit harder to self-destruct, but it can still happen. Also, anytime I talk about exotic weapons, I'm going to assume that you have the catalyst for said weapon. You should really try to go get catalysts. I would also suggest having Praxic Blade and or Wolfsbane ready, and I highly recommend getting the Attrition Orbs refit for Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane comes from the Heliostat mission in Pinnacle Ops. There are a handful of bosses where you will probably want a melee-based setup, and you will likely use one of the two. Encrypted Data Disk has Sword Storm combo, but it is an Arc and Void focused artifact, which may not play well with some of the builds I'm going to be suggesting. Solo Operative is in the Queen's Foil Sensor, boosting your weapon damage while solo, but that artifact focuses more on solar. Titan doesn't need solo operative since most of your damage will be non-weapon damage, but Warlock and Hunter might want it for solar-based weapon damage setups. Some non-explode yourself weapons I would also prepare just in case are Queenbreaker, maybe Cataclysmic or a linear of your choosing, and maybe Thunderlord. Regardless of what you opt for, try to grab an artifact that has boosts for that weapon, and if you don't have any boost there, then try to grab something for your subclass. For example, if you're running with Queenbreaker, you should try to have Particle Reconstruction from Tablet of Ruin. Solo operative, again, is in Queen's Foil Sensor, which is solar focused. One more thing I want to mention at the top here is for a specific boss, the zoetic lockset in Sundered Doctrine. This boss is basically able to be AFK killed through the use of Solar Fulmination in the artifact, Ember of Char, Ashes, and Eruption, and then just something to trigger and ignite on the boss. And this works on any class. I mentioned it at the top here because this boss can be a big pain point for a lot of people, and I just don't want to say it 3 times for all the different classes. Titans, we're going to start with you. It should come as no surprise when I say that Solar Hammer Titan is going to be the most successful build to run in the majority of dungeon encounters. Throw on Hallowfire Heart, newly buffed in the latest patch. The main point of Hallowfire Heart is to get to 10 stacks of Sunfire Furnace, get to a damage phase, pop your super with those 10 stacks, and then watch the boss's health just melt away. In terms of the build, otherwise, you're on Soul Invictus, Roaring Flames, getting fragments to keep Restoration and Radiant on you for as long as possible, the usual stuff. For the artifact, if you want solo operative, then you can scoop up Queen's Foil, but again, it is weapon damage only, which you are not primarily doing. Solar Fulmination is in the Hunter's Journal, and that might get you a little more value overall, but it's up to you depending on your playstyle. Grab as many solar perks as you can either way. Set bonus wise, I know it seems like the Lustrous set bonus is the way to go, and if that's all you got and you want to use it, go ahead, but I think with how much restoration you're going to have and with how weak the heal is, you probably don't need it. But it's not a bad pick. If you have the gear or you're willing to go get it, 2-piece Crota's End or 2-piece Deepstone Crypt are very nice to have given what you're going to be doing here. Having both might be a bit redundant, so 2-piece Smoke Jumper or 2-piece Lustrous can round it out quite nicely, or whatever you want. I think people will likely pick 2-piece Deepstone for the Disorient effect, though. Weapon-wise, it basically doesn't matter what you run during non-damage sections, since you should be killing most things with a hammer. For damage, you have a couple of options, though. Number 1, Tractor Cannon on bosses that are reasonable to hit with such a weapon, or 2, Lotus Eater, or some other Withering Gaze weapon with something like Sleeper Simulant or Queenbreaker for bosses that are not reasonable to hit with a tractor. You can run double special if you would like, since, again, you're mainly using hammer. Now, not every single encounter will be solved with Solar Titan, but it is easier for me to list out which fights you should not use Solar Titan for, so let's just quickly review. Shattered Throne, Pit of Heresy, Prophecy, Grasp of Avarice, Spire of the Watcher, Duality, Warlord's Ruin, Ghost of the Deep, Equilibrium. That's 9 dungeons that can be done with Solar Titan without really swapping the build at all. The only thing you might swap is which super you are running. The remaining 2, Sundered Doctrine and Vesper's Host, each have one fight that might be done better with a different setup. The Servitor boss in Vesper's Host is likely best performed on a Prismatic Titan with Glacial Quake, specifically using Quake to deal damage to all of the servitors during the damage phase. You can use Solar here, it's just going to take you a few more phases to complete the fight. A normal Prismatic Consecration setup works here, there's no need to get fancy. Grab a class item with Star Eater and Inmost Light. If you don't have that, that's fine, just, work with what you got. The lockset in Sundered Doctrine might be better served with an Arc Titan on Curus and then just blasting away with Le Monarch behind a Rally Barricade. I know there's some stuff with Salvager's Salvo and Trickle Charge and Reaper's Tithe that you can do, but odds are that you have the bow already and probably the Catalyst, and it's really good. Of course, the whole Ignition trick that I mentioned earlier should also work if you do it correctly. Titans have it pretty good when it comes to the solo dungeon world, as you can see, and they're probably my top pick. I mean, I do have the most experience on Titan. If anything, because this build is very simple to use, it deals a lot of damage, you get a lot of healing from it, and you can just burn your super to deal boss damage for most of a damage phase. Just remember to get 10x Sunfire stacks, and you're chilling. Moving to Warlock, you have some options depending on what you're most comfortable using. For the majority of encounters, I would absolutely recommend Prismatic Getaway Artist. This is one of the best builds in the game, if not the best build in the game when it comes to ease of use versus how powerful it is. You get a lot of survivability, a lot of automatic damage with your turret, Arc Soul. While Devour can be stronger on Void, I think the ease of Prismatic is worth the trade-off of a slightly weaker Devour trigger. This build is not changed from when it first debuted. I think I have made little to no adjustments. Bleak Watcher and Feed the Void are the aspects. Getaway Artist needs an Arc Grenade, so throw on Storm Grenade. Fragments, we got Sacrifice for more Darkness energy, although if you have a lot of that already, rotate this for something else. Protection for damage resistance. Dominance to make your Transcendence grenades weaken. Purpose for great subclass buffs on Orb pickup. If you want to run with Song of Flame, for safety purposes, that means orbs give you restoration. Nova Bomb will get you an Overshield instead. Hunter's Journal gets you a nice mix of effects that are just generally good, but also comes with sword perks in case you want to run Praxic Blade or Wolfsbane. Stats-wise, I have a few setups depending on what I'm doing. I have like a 100 grenade and then as much super and weapons stat setup. Then I have like more of a maxed out grenade and then secondary weapons setup. It just depends on how you want to handle it and your tolerance for doing armor swaps or loadout swaps in the middle of a fight. Unfortunately, some of the better set bonuses for this setup come from dungeons and raids. So like Coda 4-piece is awesome from Prophecy, while 4-piece Last Wish is heavily focused on grenade usage. For those a little more willing to take on risk at the benefit of higher damage output, Arc Warlock is and has been fantastic for a while now in pretty much any flavor that you want. I just did a video talking about it, so I would review that and get comfortable with it first if you are not already. But I guess if you're not really comfortable with it, you probably won't be using it for solo dungeons. I also know that Solar Warlock is very important to people just to have that healing safety with Restoration, Well of Radiance. So if that's more your thing, you can just sit in a Well of Radiance and shoot some guns at the boss, although at the cost of boss fights potentially taking a little bit longer. Warlock is also great for soloing dungeons, although the build to select isn't always as straightforward as Titan. That being said, for the first 5 or 6 dungeons released, you can run any setup, and I think you're fine. Shattered Throne, Pit of Heresy, Prophecy, Grasp, Spire of the Watcher, maybe Duality as well, maybe even like Warlord's Ruin potentially. Prismatic, Arc, Solar, anything that is comfortable to you, just use that. Spire of the Watcher final boss is the only boss I'd be worried about in terms of incoming damage, maybe final boss of Warlord's Ruin as well, but most of this stuff is old content which has been power crept several times over. In the back half, I would say it's a bit more boss dependent. Ghost of the Deep has 1 melee and 1 ranged boss, so break out the melee setup with Song of Flame, Prismatic, and for final, sitting in a Well of Radiance and just plinking away with like a Queen Breaker is totally fine. Warlord's Ruin has 2 mid-range bosses where he'll probably break out like 1k or Queen Breaker. Sundered Doctrine final boss can just be completed by sitting in a Well of Radiance. That's fine. Lockset can be done with the Solar Ignition Chain I mentioned earlier. Vespers, I think I just jumped around like an idiot most of the time on the last boss, but y'all are going to use the cheese spot anyway, so just throw on 1k and make sure you don't explode yourself. Equilibrium has 2 melee-based encounters, mostly, kinda. So again, toss on Wolfsbane, Prismatic for that. Warlock handles things pretty safely, maybe not as quickly. The survivability factor is what makes Warlocks a pretty reliable choice to solo dungeons. Hunters have historically been a weaker pick to solo dungeons due to never really having a build that is the definitive option on top of some survivability issues. It is very possible to solo all the dungeons on a Hunter. They're not my first choice. And I will also say that because Hunter tends to have some survivability problems, that I would lean even more towards Exodus down for a set bonus and or any other general use set bonuses that give damage reduction. However, right as I was ready to drop this video, a new Void Hunter build has been making the rounds, specifically built around Hierarchy of Needs, the exotic bow from Spire the Watcher, preferably with the Catalyst. The point is to create a ring with Hierarchy, pop Quiver, and then while Quiver is active, unload as many shots as possible from Hierarchy, then hit Quiver again right as your super's ending to continue firing your bow. This is because you get buffed bow damage while your super is active, and that's been giving some big damage. Also, the farther you are from your target, the more damage Hierarchy will do, so try to maintain some distance. If you don't have Hierarchy, or maybe you just don't want to get it, Leviathan's Breath, again with the Catalyst, is going to be the backup here. Aspects are for mainly getting some invisibility, and fragments are all about Devour. Some people like grabbing some of the stat-heavy fragments purely for the stats. I think that's fine, but if you're solo, you might want stuff that will enable you to stay alive better, whatever those things might be. The artifact is key here. You want the Implement of Curiosity with Semi-Auto Strike and Argent Quiver to keep chaining armor charge to keep your bow damage high. Stats, this entire setup is based on high super and weapon stat, as much of each as possible, leaning towards weapons first, like get it to 200, and then anything that's left over, go for super. All of your other stats will be weak as a result, though. Exotic, throw on Orpheus. I've also seen Fortune's Favor, but that might be for like a non-solo environment. Armor mod-wise, toss on anything that's going to let you survive and or deal more damage. Set bonus-wise, I think Spire the Watcher 4-piece bonus is what a lot of people have been opting for to get the bonus precision damage. If you cannot get that for whatever reason, then just throw on Exodus or whatever set bonus is going to keep you alive. Friend of the show, Sneaky, has a video breakdown of this build as well. I've linked it in the description. This build is pretty much destroying not only solo content, but pretty much all content in the game. I think people are like two-phase soloing the Witness with it or something like that. It would not surprise me if most people defaulted to this build. But again, please have the Catalyst. Like, you could do it without it, but like, have the Catalyst. Now, if you don't want to, or you can't run this setup for whatever reason, the next best option is likely Crackshot Solar Hunter with 1k, or Dragon's Breath if you don't have 1k, with Blade Barrage and Shards of Galanor. If you are willing to loadout swap, then feel free to rotate Shards of Galanor with something like Radiant Dance Machines during the non-boss damage phases. We've talked about this setup in a video. I will just show you the aspects and the fragments and all that kind of stuff pretty quickly. You can check the full video on how it all works if you are not familiar. Arc, Melee Hunter, and Prismatic Hunter were also some builds that worked in the past. Prism Hunter was mainly used with Wolfsbane and Fortune's Favor, at least in Equilibrium, but it's going to work for other melee-centric fights as well. A Void Super plus Facet of Purpose plus Wolfsbane with Attrition Orbs means a near permanent overshield boosting your damage. You can also set up Prismatic for non-melee builds if you would like. I don't think you'll need Arc Melee Hunter for a solo dungeon anymore though, but it's just like Lethal Current and Flow State with Combination Blow and a 1-2 punch shotgun, like same as always. The first batch of dungeons should just fall over to either Crackshot or Hierarchy. Shattered Throne, Pit of Heresy, Prophecy, Grasp, Spire the Watcher, Warlord's Ruin shouldn't be too much of a problem either. Duality first boss, Ghost first boss, and Equilibrium might want to utilize that melee setup with Wolfsbane that I was talking about, but you can probably use Hierarchy on like maybe the final boss of Equilibrium. I don't think I would recommend it on Harrow in Equilibrium. The remaining bosses in Duality and Ghosts can go back to Hierarchy or Crackshot though. Sunder Doctrine was unpleasant on Hunter, not impossible. Lockset is the only boss I do not recommend the Hierarchy setup. Go with Crackshot and 1000 Voices and chain ignitions as much as possible like I talked about at the beginning. For the final boss, you can go back to Hierarchy or just stay on Crackshot, whatever you're more comfortable with, but I do recommend Hierarchy. For Vesper's Host, the Servitor boss is dying very easily to the Hierarchy setup, but again, Crackshot works as well with all the ignitions that you're going to do, and Puppeteer is also falling over to both setups, but I think Hierarchy is probably the play. that is all I got. Soloing dungeons is the easiest and most accessible it has ever been, and if you have never done one, I would really suggest giving it a go now, at least with, some of the older dungeons. As always, feel free to post your own suggestions in the comments. We would be here all day if I tried to cover every single variant of every single build and every single strategy for every single fight. My intent here was to try to keep it as simple as possible. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.